Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. On the chart here, the first one, we've got some winter weather advisories out with a big storm coming up here for the Yukon Delta and St. Lawrence Island to the Bering Strait coast there. And for the Yukon Delta, looking for 2 to 4 inches of snow with winds gusting up to about 45, maybe 50 miles an hour. Snow and blowing snow there, and probably even more extensive out here for St. Lawrence Island up to the Bering Strait coast. Again, 2 to 4 inches of snow. And that's for the time period for tomorrow and tomorrow night until 9 a.m. Sunday, with visibilities with the blowing snow reduced to less than half a mile at times. Same thing for the Delta. And also a winter weather advisory out for the western Prince William Sound zone, specifically for Turnagain Pass and Portage Valley. And in the case of Turnagain Pass, looking for 12 to 19 inches of snow to fall tomorrow night, and into Monday, as 8 to 14 inches falls for Portage Valley in the forecast for that same time period. And with east winds 30 to 50 miles per hour, blowing snow there in those areas, those 2 areas, will reduce visibility to a half mile at times. On the satellite, not a lot going on here. Pretty nice day across the southeast coast. Weak disturbance sliding off to the southeast. Good conditions up along the North Gulf Coast. Some cirrus beginning to spread in over Cook Inlet late this afternoon, 4 p.m. the time of this last photo here. And a lot of clouds here over the interior, right down to the Copper River Basin. This batch of moisture there brought a few flurries here to the Copper River Basin and on up to the north. That all shifting off into Canada this afternoon. And more clouds and light snow up to the north. And then out to the west, big storm out here, bringing 60 to 80 mile per hour wind gusts across the eastern Aleutians here, Nikolsky over toward Unalaska throughout the day today, with pretty good rainfall, 24-hour amount at Unalaska, 1.5 inches of precipitation, about 1/10 of an inch falling over the Pribilofs today, St. Paul, St. George, starting out as snow and changing over to rain this afternoon with southeast winds gusting 40 to 50 miles an hour there, gusts up to 55 miles an hour occurring now for the western Alaska Peninsula, and also an increase in the wind here along the southwest coast with Cape Neuenam, seeing gusts to about 53 miles per hour late this afternoon. And those winds will continue to increase here as that front pushes eastward. Otherwise, the main low center, one right there, another one, a weak system up here over the northern Aleutians, and then yet another one farther back to the west. Up to the north off the Arctic coast, low pressure tracking eastward there, just north of Barrow. One surge of light snow pushing eastward here across the area, breaking out this afternoon. Pretty good VFR there on the east side. Looked like extended all the way over to Barrow this afternoon. But southwest winds still pretty gusty up there, mainly from Point Lay over to Barrow, anywhere from 20 to 40 miles an hour with the snow and fog. Light snow up there. In fact, these amounts generally an inch or less here over the last 24 hours through the interior. So kind of a widespread area of light snow up in the central interior, the upper Yukon Valley, and then back here across the Seward Peninsula, light snow today with that weak trough, and then some flurries down over the deltas. Again, the gradient tightening up here, so winds on the increase along the coast. In fact, looked like Cape Neuenam already reported some rainfall occurring. Otherwise dry across the Bristol Bay area and Alaska Peninsula. Rain and snow sliding into the Alaska Peninsula, that mostly in the form of rain for On Alaska, as I mentioned, Dutch Harbor, and a mixture up toward the Pribilofs, breaking out behind the front, lighter winds, more showery conditions. And the next system farther out there to the west, which tonight will move eastward to about this position there, so that'll bring more rain into the Aleutians there, into Adak and Atka tonight with a couple of troughs there, but the strongest winds will be south of the chain. Winds diminish here for the Alaska Peninsula. Wind warning ends for the eastern Aleutians at any time if it hasn't already. Strong winds through the Alaska Peninsula, gusts 60 to 70 miles an hour possible through this area. Definitely an increase in the winds for Bristol Bay, and warmer air sliding northward, so a mixture of precipitation along the coast, and conditions coming down for St. Lawrence Island. Over the interior here, look for less snow up to the north, and patchy fog, especially around Cook Inlet overnight tonight, continuing what we saw today, and probably to a lesser extent up in the valleys. Should be variably cloudy for the Copper River Basin, North Gulf Coast. No change here for the Panhandle. Mostly clear conditions, maybe a few clouds. Chance, just a risk of some snow showers there up around the Yakutat area. Otherwise, winds diminishing for the Arctic coast, especially on the west side there. Staying southwest, 10 to 20 for the eastern coast, and a few flurries possible, but those chances diminishing there. And this area pushing northwestward will bring a chance of snow into the Kobuk, Selawik valleys over toward Kotzebue area, maybe up to Kivalina, but again, very light amounts. Then pick the snow back up for the Bering Strait. And as I mentioned, conditions deteriorating for St. Lawrence Island. Bring the winter weather advisory in, snow blowing snow, gusts 50 miles per hour, 50 to 55 miles an hour, St. Lawrence Island throughout the day tomorrow. Also pretty windy here along the southwest coast. Right out of the east, very strong winds, and rain and snow down over Bristol Bay with the warmer air. Rain from the Alaska Peninsula. Gale force winds in store for Kodiak Island. Looks like storm force easterlies coming into Kamishak Bay, and northeast winds 45 knots for Shelikof Strait. And then behind the front, less wind here for the Fox Islands. Scattered showers. Rain showers all the way back to the central Aleutians, cooling off out west there, so look for some snow showers. Temperatures in the lower 30s swinging into the Shemya area. And then for Sunday, low pressure now lifting up just west-southwest or just north of St. Paul. So mixture of rain and snow all along the southwest coast, but much lighter winds now. Still pretty brisk northeasterlies here for St. Lawrence Island. Gales there into the northern Bering Sea. The low center here pulling east of Kodiak Island, so look for conditions to improve in the afternoon there with a lot less wind and tapering off showers. Mixture of precipitation here going on. Rain along the coast. Inland, a mixture of precipitation with those winter weather advisories continuing through Sunday and probably Sunday night for the Portage Valley and Turnagain Pass zones or areas there. And maybe some snow up toward the Talkeetnas, but pretty dry up over the interior, but increasing gradient, so wind, especially west here, will begin to increase, and to a lesser extent up to the northeast there. So look for mostly cloudy skies, maybe some flurries there. Basically dry along the Arctic coast, winds switching directions, becoming easterly from the west-southwesterly directions you had today and tomorrow. And definitely an increase in east winds here for the Chukchi Sea and the northwest coast. This system for Christmas Day plows into the southeast coast with full gales along the coast. Even Stevens or Clarence Strait has gale force winds in the forecast there, with probably some kind of a mixture slop precipitation occurring there as that front rolls in the inland areas. That'll be changing over to rain by the afternoon here, but look for any type of precipitation up to the north, Juneau, especially to Haines on up to Skagway. Temperatures this afternoon down that way, upper 20s to mid 30s, 36 there at Sitka, 37 down at Annette. State Capital at 28, same thing at Yakutat. Cordova up to 24, Portage 27. There are 4 degrees at Kenai, 7 in Palmer. And you can see here west of the Parks Highway, quite cold, well below 0 into the afternoon, with Talkeetna at -6 and 8 degrees. Gulkana, McCarthy 10 above, down to 12 below at Tok and 8 at Fairbanks, 6 Tanana, and a little below 0 up here over the Yukon Flats, but Bettle's up to 6 above. And the Arctic coast, kind of a range there from 6 below at Nuiqsut to -3 at Kaktovik. Wainwright 10 above, 11 over at Cape Lisburne, and lower to mid-teens here for the Kotzebue Sound area. Ambler at 19 at Nome with 12 at Wales, 15 there McGrath, and Mountain Village 19 degrees with 20 out at Amonic, Macoriac 28 degrees, and a 22 there at Bethel. Down southwest, out in the Bering Sea, 30s for the Pribilofs there, 37 at St. Paul. Upper 30s there from Unalaska and the Alaska Peninsula, warming into the mid to upper 20s here at King Salmon. Dillingham still at 13, 40 degrees in Nikolsky, cooling off down to 30 there towards Shemya. And for lows tonight, maybe down to 25 below over the Copper River Basin, toward 30 below there up over the Yukon Flats, toward Arctic Village in the clear areas there. But warmer here along the southwest coast, mid-20s, northeast Bristol Bay, all the way to St. Lawrence Island, mid-30s at Pribilos, 30s all the Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula, teens and lower 20s for the Panhandle. Highs for tomorrow are warming into the 40s here, all the way up to Pilot Point with 38 at King Salmon, 31 there from Macoriac, 40 St. Paul, same thing here for most of the Aleutians, a little cooler out west. Southeast coast, excuse me, upper 20s to mid 30s, and staying below 0 from the Yukon Flats up across the eastern North Slope. And for flying weather tomorrow morning, still lingering marginal VFR here through the northern north central interior, VFR north of the mountains there, but marginal on the western coast. Lots of IFR here for the northern Bering Sea, right up to the coastline there, Togiak Bay, maybe down to the Alaska Peninsula. Those conditions will be on the south side, the Pacific side of the peninsula. And then for the Pribilofs, more IFR out over the central Aleutians tomorrow afternoon. That slides northeastward here, coming across Kodiak Island, up along the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range, and also for the Seward Peninsula. Coming down, marginal, or VFR going marginal to IFR, especially for western Prince William Sound in the afternoon. Southeast coast stays VFR as well as much of the eastern interior. And for Anaktuvik, look for VFR tomorrow. Adigan, same forecast. Conditions falling here. Ceilings visibilities Lake Clark and Merrill throughout the day, becoming IFR. Rainy, may stay VFR the entire day, might go marginal in the afternoon. Windy though, VFR, Isabel, VFR, and Mentasta, VFR. Tanita also, hopefully VFR till this time tomorrow. And Portage, VFR early, becoming IFR definitely by this time tomorrow, if not by, say, noon or earlier. Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels at the surface, St. Matthew Island, northern Bristol Bay, up along the North Gulf Coast and down the Panhandle. 2,000 feet now, nudging up to the Alaska Peninsula and just grazing Atka Island. Icing, could see some occasional widespread moderate icing here, mostly of the Rime variety along the southwest coast of Novak Island, all the way back to Kodiak Island, with icing threats increasing here with the moisture coming in toward the Kenai Peninsula and Cook Inlet, as well as expanding back out across the northern Bering Sea, but cutting off here out over the Aleutians and the Pribilofs, icing free everywhere else. Winds aloft, high pressure shifting eastward here, southeast winds 70 knots in toward Kodiak Island. Pretty strong winds both at the surface and aloft for the southwest coast and the interior, turning westerly 100 knots there over the eastern interior, northerlies 120 knots there just east of the Panhandle. And 9,000 feet, 40 to 65 knot winds here from the western Gulf of Alaska, Kodiak across Bristol Bay, right up across the Alaska Range as well, and then 50 knot easterlies here over the northern Bering Sea. South of the low center, winds reverse direction. Westerlies 30 to 40 knots the entire stretch of the way there, dropping back to 35 knots to the Alaska Peninsula. Southeasterlies, these winds increasing throughout the day here over the south central eastern interior, but staying light up to the northeast along the Arctic coast, and even lighter winds in store here at 9,000 feet for the Panhandle. A little different at 10,000 feet. Not much. Main high center off to the west, so more of a southeast flow here developing, especially in the afternoon, 15 to 25, 35 knots. 45 to 50, even 60 knots there, Kodiak Island, up across the southwest interior, out into the northern Bering Sea, St. Lawrence Island. And again, south of the low center, westerlies 20 to 40 knots out that way. Lighter winds becoming south and southeast, southwest 10 to 15. Westerlies 20 knots possible for the Arctic coast, otherwise light for the panhandle. And for turbulence, smooth here from the Arctic coast all the way down across the Copper River Basin and the panhandle. Severe possible here, especially for small aircraft. Kodiak Island, the Aleutian Range up across Kamishak Bay and Iliamna area westward all the way out to Nunivak Island with moderate chop advancing northward to the Seward Peninsula. Definitely St. Matthew Island and the Alaska Peninsula with better conditions following in behind. And after hangar flying, I'll be back with a look at marine forecasts and the ice edge.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mary O'Connor with the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health here in Anchorage. We appreciate the support of Alaska Public Media in allowing us to bring you hangar flying. This evening, we have Mr. Jason Young as our guest. Jason is the winner of the 2016 Ginny Hyatt Memorial Scholarship, which was awarded by the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Jason, congratulations on the scholarship.
Thank you.
You're a different candidate than we usually saw. You already have your pilot certificates and your ratings, but you're working on a Bachelor of Science degree in Aeronautics and Safety Management from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. Did you always know that you wanted to be around aviation or that you wanted to be a pilot?
No, actually I didn't. Like most kids, when I turned 18, I went to college and didn't know what I wanted to do. And being a pilot was expensive and I couldn't afford it. And an opportunity came up where a family member decided to help pay for my private pilot's license. And from that point on, I was hooked.
So you started working in aviation, though, as a ramper or a load agent and worked your way up while you were working on your certificates and your ratings. So what did you learn from that experience?
That could fill a small book. I've done everything from clean the lavatories to fuel the planes to load the bags, overnight shifts by myself at executive FBOs. I learned pretty much everything around the circle of the aviation lifestyle, and it well-rounded my education. I was doing it while I was going to school, so it was pretty neat to be able to do that during the day and then go fly in the evening, and it was pretty nice.
So you definitely got the backstory of the
Yes.
aviation world while you were studying the front end.
Yes.
Do you think it made a better pilot?
It definitely taught me some things to avoid as far as how to approach your career when you get done with your commercial license, because they kind of just throw you to the wolves when you get done with getting that. But it was also nice because I had a pretty solid network of people that I knew in all four corners of it that I could kind of draw on when I graduated. So that was pretty nice.
So you are in a place right now where a lot of scholarship applicants and a lot of young people are hoping to be at some point with a career in aviation and flying professionally. Do you have any advice for people who are trying to achieve what you've already done?
I would say my biggest piece of advice would be get into flying for the flying. Don't get into it for the money or the glory or anything else, because someday you might find yourself in a Cessna 150 at 99 degrees outside with no air conditioning, or you might find yourself, 9:30 at night, 2 hours late when your cargo load didn't show up at the end of November during Christmas rush, and you need to enjoy the flying part because the rest of it is just the mundane part.
So you worked as a flight instructor as well.
Yep.
And did you think that was a valuable experience?
In my later years of doing this, I think that's actually worked out to be my most enjoyable part of it, and I have a really strong desire actually to go back to doing that because that's very fulfilling, especially when you find students that are genuinely interested in doing it, when they take the time to learn the material and really connect with them. That's quite fun. There's always going to be those students that are just there because it's school and somebody else is paying for it, but the ones that really grab onto it, it's life-changing. I mean, it's kind of like teaching somebody how to drive. As soon as you do it, they're never going to be the same.
Yeah, I've heard that you never really know the material until you try to teach it to somebody. Did you find that to be true?
Yes and no. I think a lot of that has to do with how you're taught to be a pilot. It's very intense, and a lot of it is take a test, remember more different varying levels of material, take another test, learn some more, take another test, and you don't really hit that correlation point until you have to start explaining the connections in between everything. When you can take a question and explain the connections, that's when you really learn the material. You're not just learning the answer to the question on how to do something.
Sure, sure. Do you think you would like to go back to instructing in aircraft or instructing in aviation or safety or management of aviation?
You know, my life right now, with being a stay-at-home dad, I'm going to have to work pretty hard to find something that's going to fit back into that after I graduate. When I was flying as a full-time pilot, I didn't think I was going to be married with kids because honestly, when you're that age and you're flying nonstop, it's not a very good family job to have. You're gone, you don't know where you're going to be. So going back into it, I'm going to have to work pretty hard to find something that I still enjoy doing and is interesting to me every day, but at the same time allows me to still be with my family.
Still a good fit. So I know your boys are young. Any thoughts of instructing them?
Oh, I'd love to do that. My wife has definitely set some standards that have to be met before I'm allowed to bring the kids in the plane. But I know my youngest, I'm stoking that fire actively.
Good for you. Jason, we're going to have you back on our next show and talk about what your plans for the future are. And we really appreciate you being here today.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for tuning in to Hangar Flying, and we appreciate the support of our members in the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation. Thank you very much. Until next time, fly safely.
Looking at the sea ice analysis finished this afternoon. Ice now out to Little Diomede Island, and Bering Strait forecast to completely close off sometime later Monday. So that'll pinch this still relatively ice-free area up to the north there off. And that's the forecast there. Probably see some changes with the southeast winds here. This will tend to pull some of this ice up to the northwest there, maybe hopefully not off the coast. Anyway, for marine forecasts, Lynn Canal, north 25 knots tomorrow, and then northeasterlies or north-northeast, 15 knots, central and southern inside waters with slight seas. Light winds tomorrow here on the south coast, just 15 knots. Small current advisories developing on the north coast, 25 knots. Seas not too bad, 6 to 8 feet. Then on Sunday, full gales come in, and south 40 to 45 knots here from the southeast on the south coast. 45 knots east-southeast up to the north with seas building up to 20 to 23 feet. Southeast 40 knots, 9-foot seas, Clarence Strait. Small craft advisories for Stevens Passage and Lynn Canal down under 25 knots. For the Prince William Sound zone tomorrow, east winds 25 knots, northeast 25. Northern Cook Inlet a little stronger south of the Forelands. Then storm warnings, east 50 knots. Right in across Augustine Island, northeast 45 here for Shelikof Strait, 40 knots southeasterlies, Kodiak Island, the Barrens, gales for the western North Gulf Coast. And then for Sunday, lighter winds for Kodiak now with a low pulling off to the east, coming down to 25, probably in the afternoon even under 25, west 20 Shelikof Strait, northerlies 40 knots, Kamishak Bay, and gale warnings for Cook Inlet there, south of the Forelands up to 40 knots, and then 45 knots southeast winds for the North Gulf Coast. Prince William Sound, east 45 knots, seas building to 12 feet. And Bristol Bay, east 45 knots, 11-foot seas tomorrow. Southerly gales there for the Alaska Peninsula, southeast 45, Castle Cape to Sitkinak, 23-foot seas on the Pacific side. Sunday, winds coming down, south 20 knots, Bristol Bay. West-southwest 30 to 35 here for the peninsula with the gales probably on the Pacific side with those 20-foot seas that'll extend all the way up to Sitkinak. And for the Aleutians, Fox Islands, looks like gales here south of the islands, west-southwest 35 knots, 20-foot seas, small craft advisories to the north. Northwesterlies 25 to 35 knots coming in across the central Aleutians there with small craft advisories on out to the west. And for Sunday, gale force westerlies now for the western Aleutians, and looks like west-southwest gales here for the central and eastern Aleutians with seas running 17 or 16 to 22 feet. And for the southwest coast tomorrow, almost a storm, but not quite here south of Nunivak Island. East 45 knots, 15-foot seas. Southeast 25 for the Pribilof, seas 14 feet. Easterly gales across the northern Bering Sea and St. Lawrence Island. And then for Sunday, those will turn more northeasterly up in this area. Gale force northeasterlies down across St. Matthew Island. And southwest 25 for the Pribilofs, right up to the southwest coast. North of Nunivak Island, east winds at 25. Arctic coast, west 25 on the east side there, otherwise 20 knot southwesterlies. Lighter winds here down to Cape Thompson, and then east winds coming up to 25 knots down toward Wales. Then we've got brisk wind advisories here, northeast 30 knots right up from the strait to Cape Beaufort, dropping back to 20 knots on the west side. And for the central and eastern Arctic coast, east winds 15 to 20 knots. Looking at tonight again, big storm here. So strong winds and gale force winds here for the Alaska Peninsula with warmer conditions, the rain possibly heavy at times. Winds diminishing here back over the eastern Aleutians, and more rain for the central Aleutians with mixture precipitation, mostly in the form of snow spreading up towards St. Lawrence Island. And not too bad over the interior, a few lingering flurries, and that's about it. And then for tomorrow, again, the strong wind and rain for Kodiak, winter weather advisory St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait coast, as well as the Yukon Delta. 2 to 4 inches of snow, winds gusting 55 miles an hour for blowing snow. That same pattern here developing, as I mentioned, for Turnagain Pass and Portage Valley, where a bunch of snow is expected by Monday morning, and precipitation increasing along the North Gulf Coast. That all shoves into the southeast coast the next day, still wind and snow up to the north.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.